So, right. So what I'm going to talk to you about is something that was established a couple of years ago, and which I was asked to lead. And I'll just give you the background to this, because I think it's important. While you're researchers, you need to perhaps understand the bigger context of what we're doing here in South Africa. So you can see the logos up there. These are the sponsors of the community of practice, and that's the Department of Science and Innovation, the National Research Foundation, which of course is the government agency that funds research. And the funny logo on the you'll see on the right is the South African International Maritime Institute. And that was an agency that was created by government to, I suppose you could say, implement the Operation Bakisa, addressing what they call the oceans economy. Now, just as in 2014, way back there in South Africa, we're great at making plans. We're not so good at implementing, but the government started an initiative based on a Malaysian government program, which they call Operation Bakisa, which means hurry up and rush. And the idea was to identify sectors of our economy which have potential to create wealth, generate jobs, and do all those sort of things. And there were about 6 sectors identified, one being mining. And I'm also involved in the mining Bakisa, and something known, and at Wits we're involved in what is known as the Samurdi project, which has been run out of the Mandela mining precinct, and specifically projects around advanced ore body knowledge. And so money was set aside to initiate public-private partnerships to really fast track work in to stimulate mining. The other area, of course, was the ocean economy. South Africa's marine area. Let's see now, hopefully the slide will advance here. Let me just see if it's advancing. Yeah, South Africa's marine exclusive economic zone offshore is greater than our land area because it extends to 200 nautical miles offshore. And in fact, we're busy as a nation trying to claim an extended areas where our continental shelf goes further offshore. So there's in fact quite a lot of geophysical work being done to actually map the extent of the continental shelf, which is seen as part of the continent. And so, and this is not, there are 6 what they call laboratories that have been established. And one of these is around oil and gas, offshore oil and gas. The others are around things such as tourism, such as aquaculture, you know, growing fish and mussels and oysters, shipbuilding, all those sort of things. So this is one of them that seem to hold potential. And they initially tried to advertise and create research chairs in oil and gas, but frankly, the quality of proposals that were offered were not very high. And that's because this was without a really thriving oil industry. It's difficult to attract a top researcher to come to South Africa to do work in this area. And in our universities, there's nobody really who's an expert in doing research, high-level research, got an international reputation when it comes to oil and gas. It's at Wits, we've got people like Zubair, who's very good, but he's a sedimentologist, and his focus in his research has not been on oil and gas. And of course, you need to be at least an associate professor level. We've got somebody like Musa, who's great at reflection seismics, but our focus has been on the hard rock applications of reflection seismics, not the soft rock area. And really, the call for research chairs was focused at the coastal universities, such as University of Western Cape or Nelson Mandela or Fort Hare or UCT, not the inland universities. So I sat on the panel, but we didn't put in a bid for a research chair. So after several rounds, it was decided what we need to do is to grow our own timber, to find members of academic staff who are interested in upskilling themselves. They've already got their PhDs, they're already lecturers or senior lecturers, or even professors who want to grow expertise, build their networks, and then can take up research chairs in the future. So that's the main thrust of this community of practice. And so that's what we're busy doing. And you'll see later on, there are 5 universities that are the core academic partners here. But anyway, just a little bit of looking at the background to oil and gas in Southern Africa. This is something that you must all, I guess, be including in your literature reviews. So you'll know that there were, a century ago, there were showings of oil seeps and, and things like that, that was spotted. But in 1965, SUCOR was established, as could say state-owned enterprise, to look for oil and gas. They did seismic surveys on land and also offshore, and they drilled 68 holes on land up to 1978. And these boreholes are still preserved, the core, and work can be done on that. But of course, over 50 years, the quality of the core degrades. Any gas that was trapped in the shales would have escaped. So you can't really do quantitative analysis on these old rocks. In the 1967, offshore exploration started. First gas were discovered in 1970. There were enough significant gas discoveries to establish a gas to liquids plant in Mossel Bay, and a refinery was built down there. And in 86, even some black oil was discovered. Okay, so you'll know, I guess, from your background reading and what we're doing on the VML courses, the whole thing about the kitchen down below, and depending on how hot you bake it, how deep it is, you get, and your source, your original materials, you'll get either gas or gas condensate or black oil, thicker oil. And in 2013, well, first in 2002, Suko, there's a whole I suppose, organization of all the various government agencies over here. That Petro SA was formed, and you got Suko and the Strategic Fuel Fund, and Mosgas was established, and then also the Petroleum Agency of South Africa was established over here, which really is their business is to promote oil exploration, while Petro SA is an oil exploration company. So they are different things. In 2013, the potential of shale gas was recognized, really came through from my report from the US Geological Survey when they were looking worldwide. And that's, of course, because the whole fracking technology had been developed and enabled unconventional reservoirs to be exploited. And then in 2014, as I said, this Operation Pakisa, the ocean economy leg, was launched, trying to establish chairs in petroleum geoscience, which wasn't successful, so it kind of limped along. But in 2019, Total completed the Brulpadda deep water well. I'm sure you've all heard about that. And so that was great excitement because, really we weren't having much joy on the continental shelf. And to replace the gas fields that were being exhausted, and Mosgas was running out of feedstock. And then a little bit, so this was discovered and was announced at the 2019 State of the Nation address. Cyril Ramaphosa, strategically announced. The next day, I got a phone call from the NRF and saying, hey, can we start this community of practice? And so there's been pressure to deliver on that. And then a year later, they completed their Leipert well. And in 2020, of course, these things start a bit slowly. A community of practice was launched. And many of the visions we had of sending people like Stephanie off to go and do job shadowing and time in industry, to go overseas to different labs, they haven't happened because of Stephanie having a baby, but also because of COVID, of course. And so that's what, but we're doing the best we can under the current circumstances. So these are just a little few of the pictures over here. The big announcement in February 2019, just before the State of the Nation address, of the Brulpadda discovery. And of course, what you've got over here, this is when you're in shallow water, your rigs can put their feet on the ocean floor, and so they are stable. The moment you go to deep water, where it's more than 500 meters deep, you have floating rigs, so they're a lot more susceptible to currents and storms, a lot more expensive to run, a lot more risky. And in fact, Total started drilling a year or two previously. They didn't complete the well because of bad weather, so they had to go back later to continue with the drilling. Okay, and you can just see some of that. Other news over here, of course, this was in 29th October. Petro SA says this Mossel Bay plant will run out of gas by December 2020, placing 1,500 jobs at risk. So there's a lot of interest at keeping these plants going over here. There are jobs at stake over here, and so this is what's at stake. Okay, 28 October 2020, second major gas discovery off the coast of South Africa. That's the Leipert well. And then, of course, this community of practice idea is, while it's funded by the offshore ocean economy project, it would be stupid just to focus only on that. The idea is to look at all oil and gas in South Africa, so onshore as well. So the scope does include things such as fracking and onshore oil discoveries. And also the idea is not only to look in South Africa, but to look further afield, look at our partners in Southern Africa. And right now, I'm sure you've heard of the massive gas discoveries and development in northern Mozambique, but which Total is leading. But of course, that's been put on hold because of the, I suppose, the civil war up there. They're active exploration now. Wells are being drilled even as we speak in the Okavango Basin. There are discoveries being made offshore Namibia. Because the whole idea, and this is where the South African Oil and Gas Alliance comes in, is this is an opportunity for South Africa to provide expertise and services, not only in South Africa, but to the whole region. And so we're looking at it. And in fact, this morning, I was a little bit late for this meeting because I'm in contact with people at the Eduardo Botlani University in Maputo. I was just writing a note to a colleague over there to try to see how we can put collaboration together there. So if we, let's say, run a course, get an expert from overseas, that that we can get his students and our students, our folk here together and attend the course concurrently. So that's the kind of collaborations we try to work on. But going back, I mean, there's great expertise in South Africa. It's just not so much in the universities. And the American Association for Petroleum Geologists, they published this atlas back in 1995 already, because what we find in our Karoo, in the Tankwa Karoo, is you get classic exposures of these petroleum systems. And they don't even have any petroleum anymore today, but you can go walk in the field, you can look at the outcrops, and you can really understand the concepts of sequence stratigraphy. So this is a magnificent publication. I've got it sitting on my shelf here in my home office right now. Also, way back, there are two South African geophysicists, George Smith and Maurice Gidlow, won one of the premier Society for Exploration Geophysicists Award, the Reginald Fessenden Award, in 2002 for the work that they did in developing direct hydrocarbon indicators using amplitude variation with offset. And in fact, Maurice, I was his master's supervisor. He did some of this work when he was at SUCO in the 1980s over here. And I mean, I wasn't the brains. George Smith and Maurice were the brains, but I was his supervisor when he did some of this groundbreaking work. And so I was his master's supervisor. So we go back away. And so there's been world-class work has been done in South Africa in this field. And then, of course, more recently, there's Musa. The work that he did for his PhD, graduated in 2013. But one of the papers that came out of his PhD wasn't related to oil and gas, but was related to reflection seismic imaging and using the latest techniques to reprocess legacy data to extract more information. And not only did he get his PhD, he and Eldridge Kagaswani were the first two Black South Africans to get PhDs in geophysics. And in fact, Eldridge beat Musa to it because his surname starts with a K and Musa starts with an M. So he was beaten by a few minutes to get his PhD formally. But anyway, the paper that Musa and we published over here got the Best Paper in Geophysics Award. So we can do world-class stuff here. But our work plan over here for this community of practice over here is, and the rules are, a community of practice is one of the vehicles the NRF has to promote research. The others are bursaries. Some of you have NRF bursaries and scholarships. Others are research chairs, such as I hold. Centers of excellence, such we have at Wits, Chimera, and also communities of practice. And a community of practice has to be led by two research chairs, and myself and Mary Scholes are the co-leaders. Mary is an ecologist, but she's also a specialist in systems analysis, and she and her husband Bob, a few years ago, published this book on climate change briefings from South Africa, where you look at, and part of what we do in this community of practice is try to bring out something similar, where we're going to see over here to get the key questions, simple but evidence-based answers to key questions that are facing decision makers over here. And then the other parts of this are, the major part of it is really the development program for lecturers. And there are 5 core universities, or 6 that are part of this. The Cape Peninsula University of Technology, they have a master's program in petroleum engineering. Fort Hare University, they have a geophysics and geology department there, and they have people working, on much like you folk do on oil and gas issues, getting data from PASA and others. Nelson Mandela University, that's the SAIMI is based on that campus. UJ, of course, because they're partners in Chimera, University of the Western Cape. They've been running for the last 15 years a master's program in exploration and also petroleum geoscience, and of course, Wits. And then so we've identified staff members, of which Stephanie is one over here, and Dr. Nkazi is another, and Zubair is another. who are, can be supported by this to build their networks, gain experience right now. Then the idea is also that these folk would be running MSc projects, as Stephanie is doing over here. So that's part of what she's doing over here. And at the same time, we are linking and with folk doing background, I suppose, baseline studies around looking at just the whole economics of exploration and petroleum, what's going on in the whole region over here, looking at the economic impacts, looking at the environmental impacts on the ocean, on the coast, in the Karoo, and all the trade-offs here. Now, the kind of questions, as we can see, are the key questions that people ask. Well, what about marine life if you have this? What are the chances of there being a major spill? Why are we looking for fossil fuels when there's global warming? So that's really the whole background to this. This is our sort of our universe over here, as you can see. So we've got our steering committee over here in upstream oil and gas. And frankly, I've got more people on this Limit steering committee than I've got researchers here. It's a bit top heavy, but I think we at Wits see this as a great opportunity to link into the South African industry, to do something that's relevant, to have an impact, and to perhaps build relationships to with other that we can use to fund other research work. As you might know, the NRF's budget has been slashed. They've lost 800 million rand on their budget this year, so funding is scarce. So that's why we are working very hard to generate other sources of research funding. But at the center is our steering committee, and the people who sit on the steering committee, of course, are the two leaders, Mary and myself. We've got the Center of Excellence, Chimera, that's the Center of Excellence in Mineral and Energy Resource Analysis. In the past, it was largely focused on metals and minerals, and the energy was mostly coal, but now we are growing that E to include oil and gas. Then are there what we call the sectoral education and training authorities. Three of them: the Chemical Industry Training Authority, the Energy and Water SETA, and the Transport SETA, because of course they are involved also in these offshore things, tankers and whatnot. Then there are three, the states involved through in fact, 4 ministries. The department, DEFIT, they've changed it, the Department of Fisheries, Forestries and the Environment, Science and Innovation now, Minerals and Energy, and Trade and Industry, and then the government agencies that are involved, the NRF, the Petroleum Agency, and the South African International Maritime Industry, and then, of course, industry itself. I've got representatives from Petro SA, Shell, and Total on my steering committee. So there are 20 of us on the steering committee. It's chaired by the Dean of the Science Faculty, Nithya Chetty. And then our partners in the next, you could say, orbit over here are those academic partners. You see Cape Peninsula University of Technology, Fort Hare, Western Cape, Nelson Mandela, UJ, Wits, the Wits Reflection Center, Chimera. And then you go into the greater circle over here. The next orbit are things on a national scale: the Petroleum Agency, the Council for Geoscience, the CSR, Petro SA, the South African Oil and Gas Alliance, Upstream Training Trust. And then we'd go even further over here are the regional partners. You've got things like the University Eduardo Mondlane in Mozambique, Africa Array, which I co-lead, University of Namibia, NAMCOR, ASINAM. These are the agencies active in, let's say, Namibia. And then when one goes globally, there are Total, Shell, Chevron, CGG, Schlumberger, and other partners like this as well. So this is sort of the universe in which we try to work. So that's really just when I gave the launch meeting, I was just highlighting the Chimera symposium last year, where there were people giving papers and posters. These are Wits and Fort Hare and Western Cape students over here that were giving papers as part of that. There's a Chimera colloquium coming up soon. So Steph, anybody, as I'm sure you know, who's funded by Chimera will have to do the same shortly and be preparing your stuff for that. And I was just highlighting all the conferences that were meant to be happening. With my grants, I will hopefully be funding our staff and some of the students to attend these things. But sadly, many of them have been postponed because of COVID. But as they come back online, we will be trying to ensure that we are engaged and have a presence at these sort of meetings. And then I just highlighted the Seismic Research Center at Wits. You probably know more about it than I do, and some of the people there and some of the facilities. This is, of course, Eric's over here. One of the things that we're really trying to push over here, working with the Western Cape, is the whole thing about physical properties lab over here. It's in the past, they've worked on hard rock, on platinum and gold mines and coal mines. We were trying to increase their capability to work on our soft rocks. And this is just a little bit of the data sets we use and showing you some of the stuff. I showed them some of the stuff that people like Wuyo have been doing, magically been working. So really, that's the outline of the community of practice. And I'm doing my best to keep it all going over here. We're scheduling our next meeting of our steering committee. And of course, we haven't followed our original work plan. It's a forces outside our control, and I'm hoping that they will extend, roll over some of the grants. I haven't spent it all. But I suppose that what affects you, and some of you have been involved with that, is right now is making use of the IHRDC learning materials. And Kamala and I right now are busy on the petroleum project economics course. Many of the others have done the courses in geophysics and the geology courses coming up, which I think are promising, and the business fundamentals. So this is one way in which we are right now trying to keep this all moving. And of course, there's a whole bunch of students at all these institutions who are currently busy with master's and PhD degrees. The problem over here is not so much the production of, I suppose you could say, young practitioners, because you can develop somebody like that from, from first year to masters in 5 or 6 years, but is to develop the professors over here, because that takes a good 10 to 15 years postdoctoral before you have the papers, the reputation, and networks to be appointed as a research chair. So that's where we see is our real gap, what we call the missing middle over here, okay, in the academic pipeline over here, are the folk that are ready to be, become professors. So that's where we are. Thanks, Steph. I can take any questions or comments.